Saying good afternoon as quickly as that. Must be gaining some authority, to my surprise. You're all very welcome back, and thank you for staying. The hardcore, well, it's a big hardcore to be fair, are here, and you're going to hear the best part of the conference now coming up, I believe. So well done for staying. My only job is now to introduce our next chair, Ella McSweeney, who's a journalist working with RT and The Guardian and many other outlets. So somebody who's focused on food and farming as a subject matter, and she's going to see us through this next session in the afternoon. Thank you very much, Ella, for coming to be with us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. I was here this morning and was very invigorated by the sessions that I heard. I then had to take a little bit of a break, so I missed the middle bit, but I'm delighted to be back here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing our three speakers. Two things this morning struck me, two things that were said. Bernard Glosser, head of the HSE, said we have to be hopeful, but hope is not a strategy. And it brought to mind an amazing trip I had down to the students, these climate leaders in Ardscoil na Mara, down in Tramore in Waterford, who are being led by their remarkable science teacher, Dr. Patrick Kerwin, who's leading the Irish Sustainability Schools Network. And they are trying to marry hope with action. And one of the students said to me, I act on climate because I want to change things because it's a way of making me feel better. So for them, action is how they deal with how they're feeling. And it was just a very instructive way to deal with what I think all of us are sometimes feeling when we think about it more than 2 seconds and realising the kind of urgency of action that is needed. And then, of course, we heard John Gibbons, who said that people are more focused on the end of the month than the end of the world. Rightly so, I would argue. Who wants to be focused on the end of the world? But certainly it is action that we need, and it's action at a pace that maybe is going to be the biggest challenge for us. To a certain extent, the talking is over, and we need to see action rapidly. And I'm really delighted and looking forward to this session because we are going to hear from people who have done just that. And no better person to start it off than our first speaker, Sean McCabe, Head of Climate Justice and Sustainability in Bohemians Football Club. He's over 15 years in climate justice. He has a background, I think, in physics, and then spent a couple of years in the private sector, and then worked with the Mary Robinson Foundation on projects around the world. But he is now doing some really interesting, pioneering work, looking at working with the people around the football club and using that circle of trust, as he talks about it, to make action happen. So please put your hands together for Sean McCabe.
Thank you, Ella and Philip. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to try to talk quickly. I have a lot of slides. I won't talk quickly. I'll go through the slides quickly and talk constructively. We're talking today about authentic engagement, and I think that's really of significance. The line that I wasn't here this morning, so apologies if I repeat stuff, but the idea that people are more concerned with the end of the week than the end of the world is a very significant issue. We are dealing not with a crisis in thermodynamics or a crisis in environmental science. It's a crisis, and it's a socioeconomic crisis. It always has been and continues to be. I'm not going to show many graphs, but and I don't know if this graph was shown this morning, but we're in extreme peril. The Paris Agreement enshrined 1.5 degrees Celsius as a key target. The reason being, at that temperature, countries start to cease to exist. Kiribati, Samoa, Papua New Guinea start to go underwater. We've been trending above that target for almost all of the last 12 months. The crisis is upon us. There we go. I'll just go back one really quickly. There we go. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about today is the origins of our work, where it came from, why we're doing what we're doing. Some core beliefs, why I'm working in sport, why we think sport, and sport shares a number of commonalities with healthcare, in that I think there's a certain level of trust that we have to leverage in order to ensure that we can create change. But why our core beliefs around sport as a catalyst for climate action. A little bit on our initiatives at Bose, leading to the Spark, which is our biggest initiative. It's a Community Climate Action Fund project that we've been running now for 2 years. And then finally, we'll end with an exclusive announcement that we can give you here today that's pretty exciting. So first off, the origins of our work. I don't think Mary Robinson made it this morning, unfortunately, but that's a photo I took in 2015, sitting behind Mary. You'll recognise Al Gore on her right. This was at the Paris negotiations at COP. This was a meeting to bring together some of the most powerful countries in the world with some of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. This group ended up being called the High Ambition Coalition, and they drove through the Paris Agreement, which is now in such jeopardy. I was always disconcerted because it felt like we were talking about very grand notions at that level that really didn't resonate with the conversations that were happening within my own friend group or community. We were very much not connecting the dots between what was happening at the multilateral level and what was happening locally. So when the foundation wrapped up, that was for the first time I ever spoke to Ella. I got in a van and drove around the country speaking to farmers. I thought that was maybe the most intractable climate issue in Ireland, and if we could just try to understand that a little bit, we might understand more about how to solve some of the bigger issues. Those conversations were very informative and led to the publication of The People's Transition, a piece of work with TASC and the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, which basically said we don't have time to bring people with us. We have to proactively build support for the climate transition through the actions we take. We have to make material differences in the lives of people in order for them to buy into the transition. That's obviously available online if you want to read it. It's based on this simple construction that people have to be allowed to participate, that their participation has to be valued and their local knowledge, their knowledge, what they bring to the table has to be taken seriously. And then solutions have to be co-created with people, with communities. And if we can get that right, we'll create a virtuous cycle that you see on the outside there, expanding trust in our institutions, expanding belief in this, that we can tackle this crisis in a way that improves equality, that doesn't diminish it, and actually moves us into a safer and fairer world. AIB saw some value in what we were doing and gave us some funding for a pilot project which we conducted in Phibsborough. The output of that pilot project looked a bit like this. We first mapped the community, listened to what they had to, before you listen to what they have to say, you understand who's in the community. So the first thing was to go to the census data and really understand who is here. If you turn to a community and say we're going to have a conversation about climate change, you often get people you don't want to talk to. They're mad about climate change, they love talking about it, they're full of kind of ideas from the 90s. And if you want to move past that, you kind of have to create more mini publics of people who actually are more in touch with reality in some regards. Then the listening was very proactive. We listened to people not about climate, but about their immediate concerns. And we took away their immediate concerns and said, well, how do we devise solutions for those immediate concerns that also help us tackle the climate crisis? This was the People's Transition is based around a concept of climate justice, but also a concept of community wealth building, that big institutions like hospitals, like universities or football clubs can serve as community wealth builders within their communities because they are, in a sense, anchors that tie a community together. They're there for a long time, and they have the ability, through procurement and other means, to direct how they spend money. They can lift up communities and they can lift up our natural environment. I went to Bohemian Football Club. I was already a member of the club, and I said to the board, is there any chance we could try to be an anchor institution in this model? And they said, yes, of course, as long as you do it. So I started a voluntary role about 4 years ago. We announced it, and it was astounding, the reach that it has had since. It was the first climate justice officer anywhere in the world. We were on CNN, and since then we've been to very many events around the world trying to bring this attention to climate justice to sport. What does climate justice mean in the context of sport? Well, we've got to ask ourselves this question. Do we really understand the role of sport in the climate crisis? We believe we do, and our belief is governed by three core principles. And there are three principles for social transformation, not quite for climate justice. The first is that social transformation is in fact the most important element of our work on the climate crisis. What do we mean by that? Well, we're a member of the European Football for Development Network. That's 175 football clubs all around Europe. I estimate, we don't all report on our emissions, but those of us who do, I estimate that we are responsible for about 6 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent each year, which obviously sounds like a lot, but it's not that much when you stack it up against European emissions. It's actually about 0.25%. Now, 0.25% is still significant, but there are 209 million football fans in Europe. They account for about 1.62 billion tonnes of CO2, or about 60% of European emissions. So if we were to visualise that, that's Dalymount Park in the foreground. You'll probably recognise Croke Park, and then the beginning of Dublin Bay behind it. If we, as a football club, and all of our 174 other partners in the European Football for Development Network, were to reduce our emissions to zero, it would look like taking that much out of the atmosphere of carbon dioxide equivalent every year. If we managed to support our fans to take action, it would look something more like that. You begin to see Skerries, you can begin to see the Wicklow Mountains. So, when we consider transformation, yes, we should be rapidly reducing our carbon footprint, and we intend to. We actually have the most ambitious target in world football to reach real zero by 2035. But this is par for the course. If the horizon of your ambition is to reduce your own carbon footprint, you're not really aware of the planetary emergency that we're living in. If you're in a planetary emergency, we have to look at the differentiating factors. We have to figure out ways to play to our strengths in order to make the transition. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone, because unless everyone can make it, nobody's making it. You could take away from that the only thing we need to do is educate our fans and tell them to reduce their footprint. But actually, that would be a misunderstanding of the crisis that we're in. The crisis, as I said at the beginning, is a socioeconomic crisis. It's a human rights crisis. It's a people crisis. It's a crisis of what people are capable of doing. So our second belief is that we have to make climate action accessible to our community. To understand that, you have to understand this graph. It's a global graph produced by Oxfam every year or two in advance of Davos. And it tells us something we probably inherently know already, that the richest 50% globally the richest 10% globally account for 50% of world emissions, and the poorest 50% account for about 10% of world emissions. And you might say that's obvious on a global scale, so much energy poverty in the world, so many countries, people don't turn on a light bulb from one end of the year to the next, right? But in reality, if you look at Ireland, the exact same statistic holds. The richest 500,000 people in Ireland account for about 50% of emissions. Richest 500,000 people in Ireland, that's roughly 10% of the country's population. People's circumstances determine whether they can act on the climate crisis at all. This is a global survey we did with the UNFCCC. We led the development of the UNFCCC's Sports for Climate Action fan mobilization strategy called Bigger Than the Game. And one of the questions was this: what actions are accessible to you? What can you actually hope to do? Those icons from left to right are retrofitting energy-efficient appliances, heat pumps, solar power, organic food, and electric mobility. We don't need to educate anyone. People know about the solutions. They just can't afford them. This is a very important thing to recognize. We're spending an awful lot of time on awareness raising, but it's like having a vaccine and charging 20, 30,000. We'd probably all still be in the pandemic, right? So it's about listening, not preaching. I guess I'm preaching right now, but it's about doing the opposite to this. This event is set up for you to be preached at, but ideally we'd listen. The third belief, and this is key for us as a football club, we're a fan-owned football club. We don't have any major investors. We all pay 400 quid a year, and we own the football club. And we believe that if you can own a football club and compete at the highest level available to you, you can own anything as a community and compete at the highest level available to you. And that's a really important element of the transition, because often, there we go. There are 3 billion football fans around the world, but often when people visualize sustainability in sport and mobilizing fans, they see fans as this: 3 billion individuals that can be accessed and told how to change their individual behaviors to save the planet. That is misguided, in my opinion. Really, you should see this. That's 5 million people on the streets of Buenos Aires celebrating Argentina's World Cup victory. For what it's worth, I think there was only 2 arrests that day. Football brings a sense of belonging. Sport brings a sense of belonging. We talk a lot about hope. I really don't think we need that much hope. I think fear of failure, if you hadn't studied for your leaving cert and you were going in, and you told someone, "Oh, I'm hopeful though." It's the fear of failure that got you through your leaving cert. That's what we need to get us through the climate crisis. But we also need belonging from a mental health perspective. Anyone who's talking about climate anxiety, that's a very neoliberal concept. It exists in a world where people are left on their own in the face of the crisis. We need a sense of belonging, not just for our own mental health, but also for the solutions. We believe we can use the economies of scale that are inherent in football fandom to build community wealth through the climate action we take, and that will deliver transformative solutions. Just quickly, I'm probably well over time, and I'm only about 3/4 of the way there. No, I'm doing okay? Oh, great, fantastic. A little bit on our work, right? The first project we did when we started this initiative was a European-wide project called Football for Climate Justice, and it began with a survey, listening. It began with listening. They're the clubs that took part, so we've Club Brugge in Belgium, FC Twente in the Netherlands, Ferencváros in Hungary, St. Pauli and Werder Bremen in Germany, Real Betis and Fundación La Liga in Spain. The first question we asked was, do you want us doing this at all? And our fans came back resoundingly, aside from FC Twente. I don't know what's up with them. They're surrounded by dikes. You'd think that would be a big... Anyway, our fans came back 85% yes, we want the club to be involved in developing solutions for the climate crisis. That's a good start. The next was, well, do you have a greater sense of connection to your club or your community? Community is a nebulous concept. A club isn't, and people felt connected to their club. And that, I can guarantee you, is true whether you're talking about football or biathlon or rugby or tennis or whatever it is. People have a sense of connection to their club. This is very, very valuable in a climate transition. But very disturbingly, we asked them to agree or disagree with certain statements, and one of those statements was, I sometimes have difficulty paying my utility bills. 43% of our members came back and said they sometimes have difficulty paying their utility bills. How the hell do we expect to make a transition if 2 in 5 people can't even afford to pay their bills right now? So we teamed up with Friends of the Earth, and we created this piece of work, Levelling the Playing Field. This was building on some brilliant work Friends of the Earth had done, digging into how inaccessible government grants were for the general population in terms of retrofitting. And we were able to bring some quite meaningful engagement, again, back to that idea of authentic engagement. That's the photo on the bottom there is our club captain, Keith Buckley. He had just picked up a pretty serious injury. He came in and spent 2 days with us calling all of our older members to get them involved in this initiative, which was wonderful. And that's also Johnny Afalabe, a striker who we have since sold and could have done with him this year. We were able to group our members into categories based on the barriers that they face in terms of accessing solutions. Now, this begins to put pay to any idea of a one-size-fits-all approach developed at a national level. We are a club with 2,500 members, and within those 2,500 members, we found 4 categories of barriers. This is a complex issue. It's inherently complex, and trying to simplify it isn't necessarily the solution. It takes resources and time and energy to try to understand the barriers people face. We wrote a policy brief. We launched it in the Dáil. Another good thing about being a football club is actually politicians want to be associated with you, which is fun. So you get people's ear. And we established this target, which is ludicrously ambitious, and we're still trying to figure out how to do it. But we want every single member to have received an energy upgrade of some kind by the end of 2026. Our plan to do that is fourfold. We're developing an energy master plan with SEAI. It's a unique one because it's not looking at our own utilities. It's actually looking at our fans' housing stock and trying to understand how you have a hybrid plan. We're developing volunteer repair teams, a suggestion that was made by Kadima. Basically, they're going to go door to door in our community and do very simple measures like installing draft excluders or flow restrictors or things like that. We have a very exciting project with the Community Credit Union and about 12 or 13 other institutions around Europe looking at innovative financing mechanisms, which we can talk about maybe later. And trusted contractors. A lot of people have money to spend, but they don't know how or when or where to spend it. That will hopefully address that. The club will have a list of contractors we vouch for. Just quickly, we started this programme thanks to the Irish Human Rights Equality Commission, partnership with the Centre for Environmental Rights at Community Law and Mediation. We basically wanted to learn whether our fans understood their rights as they pertain to environmental rights, and if not, how we might inform them of their rights. We surveyed over 200 members, both in person and online. We then had a number of workshops trying to understand, well, how do we best communicate to our members their environmental rights? And it's ended up with this, which will be serialised in the matchday programmes next year. Our season kicks off in February. We're going to have different comic strips each week talking about specific environmental rights. That one is on the right to adequate housing. Obviously, that's an environmental right. Okay, I have 1 minute. I might nip along. The Spark is our most exciting project. This is the coalition. We've got a community activation group of about 5 local community entities. We've got a research and governance and project design cluster that includes TU Dublin, and we've got dissemination partners, including the FAI, and we've some expert advisors as well. This is almost exactly a year ago. We moved into our new space, and my 2 wonderful colleagues started the same week. And thanks to a significant amount of volunteer effort, we've been able to transform the space, first the office, that's where we work now, and then this was an old gym. There was no budget for actually the work, so we had to do it all ourselves. It got a bit messy. But we've been able to rebuild the space, and it looks a little bit like that now. We're teaching classes, community education classes in retrofitting and solar power, off-grid solar basically, and bike mechanics, but all through a cooperative lens, because our ambition is to actually establish a cooperative. Back to that idea of this being fan-owned, worker-led, worker-owned. That's the future. We've had enough of extractive processes. It's not just coal that gets extracted. It's also wealth of communities. This is something like our timeline. We've got a home. We're now teaching this Spark Skills program. It's an 8-week module. We've 150 people on the waiting list. It's being taught in Mountjoy Prison as well, because obviously there's a lot of prisoners will be emerging into a very different world than they were probably sentenced in. We've got a bike library and a library of things coming online as soon as I can get someone to insure them. We'll have a children's climate cooperative and after schools program, all towards launching a co-op in autumn 2025. I just beg your indulgence, I'll take 1 more minute to spin through 2 things really quickly. What could this lead to? Right, our North Star is the Mondragon Cooperative in Spain. I don't know if you've heard about it, but basically it's a cooperative set up in the 70s to sell butane. Now it employs 70,000 people. It has sales in 150 countries, and it has a turnover of 11 billion. So, like, we can do remarkable things as communities. The announcement, I'll fly through this. It's really good news, though. We just got money for an air quality project. We got 400,000 from the EU. Obviously, air quality intersects with public health and climate, quite dramatically associates the two. We've got a new Clean Air Champions League that we'll be kicking off in the next couple of months. You're the first group to ever hear about this, which is great. It's ourselves, Wolverhampton Wanderers in the UK, Real Betis, the Bulgarian Football Union, and ADO Den Haag in the Netherlands. And it'll look a little bit like this. We'll be installing high-quality air monitors at all of our grounds. We'll have a live online league table, so you'll be able to log in and see how you're doing against other clubs around Europe. And we'll be running community education alongside the side of that, and also trying to convince other football clubs to get involved. Anyway, that's it. Just back to this. We've no time. Really have to be doing everything we can right now. And thanks for listening, and sorry for taking a bit too long.
Thank you, Sean, very much. We'll take questions at the end of these sessions. I'm delighted now to introduce Samantha Fahy, who is a sustainability manager in DCU. Dr. Fahy has over 20 years of experience in the management and administration of high technology research projects, and she supports currently the development and embedding of sustainable solutions across DCU. She's a background in business, a PhD in entrepreneurship, and she's held her role in DCU since 2013. I'm delighted to introduce her. Samantha.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the HSC for inviting me. I will try and get through my slides, and I do need to see because I have a lot of clicks, so hopefully these clicks will all work. So the title of this talk used to be the Sustainability Challenge and how we were going to meet our sustainability challenge. But over the last 10, 15 years that I've been working in sustainability, I've come to the realization that there is no solution to the actual climate change or sustainability challenge. Sustainability being that interconnectedness of social, cultural, economic, and environmental, and how it all needs to balance together. And so I'm now seeing it as a predicament. And a predicament that we're going to have to figure out together how we navigate our way through this predicament to a future that is going to be good for us and for all of the other people on this earth, but also all of the other entities on this earth, so that we are not separate from nature and trying to impose this down. We are part of it, and we all need to make the changes to actually do it. So this is the sustainability predicament and how we navigate it together. I'm a practitioner, so I'm the sustainability practitioner in trying to deliver a different initiative. So I'm going to run through some information on what possibilities are out there. So first of all, given the health theme of it, we're looking at some of the big symptoms. So rather than there being solutions to it. So climate change is a symptom, as is biodiversity loss, pollution, and that be air, water, or plastic pollution, joint drought, water scarcity, resource depletion, and deforestation. These are all symptoms of what's going on at the moment. All of these symptoms are created by much bigger system-wide problems. Our economic model based on infinite growth. I come from a physics background. You cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet. It just is a physical impossibility. Silo thinking. We're really clever folk, and we're going to come up with the answer. We just don't need to change just yet. Any minute now, somebody really smart will come up with the answer, and we will be able to continue business as usual. Short-termism. We need to fight this fire right now, and then we'll worry about that further problem that's further away from us once we've got through this firefighting. Geopolitical conflicts. They are I guess it's like the existential threat that was said earlier. You know, is it climate change or war? And I think it is both of them. But this is hugely directly related to the resource constraints. So directly related to it is the conflicts that tend to go on. The social unrest, the unjust transition, how the global north can continue to consume the resources and say, well, we just don't have quite enough money just yet to give it to the developing world for them to actually make the changes. Or this ideological extremism and polarization. Now, I don't think any of this, and so one of those images is from Kulak not so long ago. But coming from a higher education institution, I don't think we can turn away from these, and we have to actually figure out how we are as inclusive as possible, working with the likes of Sean to bring in, not that that was to do with polarization or extremism, but it is to bring in the entire community into what we're doing. So we have a global polycrisis. Not just one thing, the image on the, and I don't know my left from my right, the little dots on it, is an extract from the World Economic Forum. So not known for their great love of sustainability, but it does show their understanding of the complexity of sustainability and how it is all interlinked together. The image on the other side, John Gibbons showed it this morning, it is the planetary boundaries. And one of the interesting points about these planetary boundaries is that we have currently breached, is it 6, if not 7 of the 9 boundaries? 5 of those boundaries are nature-based. The one at the top, the very at 12 o'clock, is the climate change boundary. Now, we tend to talk about climate change as this one thing, but we need to remember that there is 5 of those that are all nature-based, that this one blue-green planet that we live on is our only source and only place. Now, unless any of you got tickets on the Elon Musk trip to Mars, and off you go if you do, but for me, it's trying to protect this one blue-green planet that we have got to live on. And to protect us on it. So it is remembering the biosphere integrity, remembering this fight at the moment for our nitrates directive and how we must keep the nitrates directive. We cannot possibly keep the nitrates directive. We've got to actually change the system so that they actually meet the challenge that is out there. So it is all really complex, and it will impact everyone and everybody. So absolutely everything is going to be impacted by this. There is no getting away from it. There is no, well, I suppose if you're on the train with or on the bus with Elon Musk, you might be, but it is going to impact everybody. And money is not going to get us out of this either. This is looking at national action. So where we're going to on a national action. So the grey line is where we should be going to. The orange line is with our existing measures where we're projected to get to. And the blue line is with additional measures on top of those existing measures where we're going to get to. So in truth, nowhere near where we actually need to get to. This is international action. So this is an extract from the IPCC's sixth assessment report. What it is it's the temperature bars. What I like about it, though, is it actually shows that there are different scenarios for the future. The future is not fixed, and we have got lots of options and chances to make changes so that we can actually look for a different future. This is where our current students from university, the average current students are coming in around 20, and the marked here is where they would be when they're 70. At the moment, given the current business as usual model, we're giving them a 40 to 50% chance of living on a planet that is at +3 degrees. Now, the science will say that organised human existence is not compatible with a planet at +3 degrees. So we won't have killed everybody off. We'll just have a bit of mayhem going on instead. So I'm looking at a horizon of where is the future and where is it going? What does it look like for us? So when we will be post-carbon, where we're supposed to be halfway there in 6 years' time, and we're supposed to be all the way there, 0 carbon by 26 years' time. And so this is a little extract from Johan Rockström's talk from the planetary boundaries about the amount of carbon that is left in the atmosphere that we have got to contribute to before we drive the whole planet over the 1.5 degrees. And of course, carbon is cumulative in the atmosphere, so the little red sliver is what's left. And of course, our proportion, our equitable proportion of that in Ireland is much smaller than that. And a lot of the data at the moment would say that by 2025, we will have exceeded our equitable distribution, our equitable share of that piece of the pie. Which means that we will go into overshoot, and what we'll have to do is, or what we should do if we were morally thinking about it, is to write a promissory note and say we're going to extract back out of the atmosphere or go sub-carbon for long enough to actually take us back to the equilibrium. So for me, I think there's new educational, business and economic models will be needed for the future that we face. A future that will be 0 carbon, It will be much more locally focused, much less materially consumptive. And materially consumptive, it is not just going to be an energy transition to get to a sustainable world. We have got to actually reduce consumption levels because nature bats last. There is only one finite planet, and if we keep continuing to consume it, then it is going to actually run out. And then we need to protect and restore nature and our living environment. And there are models out there. So there is the Kate Raworth donut economics model, which looks at how do we deliver on the societal foundations and actually not breach the external planetary boundaries. So the donut is where we're trying to actually live in. So within the donut are these basic needs. So the delivery of a decent income, a decent education, a decent standard of living. And then the one beside it is donut academia. So looking at the academic system, and one of the authors is in the audience, Claire, who looks at how do we translate that to the education system, and how do we look at delivering the best education we can, but within the planetary boundaries. Not about how do we tinker at the edges so that we can continue business as usual, but how do we transform what we're doing? How do we think about what does education look like in a zero carbon world? And I guess the same would be true for healthcare. It is not about it is, of course, we will need to do all the projects. All of the small bits will all get together, but somebody needs to step off the stage and start looking at the system holistically about how we need to change the system rather than just let's get some more EV chargers and, if we take this and we'll give people some electric bikes and then we'll all be fine. It is a transformational change that will be required. So this is, for me, a huge part of my role in DCU was trying to understand what our impact was. And so for my sins, I got involved with the Vascular Society for Great Britain and Ireland, and we started looking at how they needed to change some of their measures. So they were looking at, we looked at endoscopes. And one of the companies is currently producing single-use endoscopes. And I tried to figure out, was this a convenience push from the doctor's side, or was this a marketing push from the company side so that they could actually sell more of them? But somehow the system has to really start thinking about this. A single-use endoscope that you have all of that technology into it that's used once and chucked in the bin. It's kind of the extreme of a paper coffee cup, and I've got really sick of people saying let's just change the paper coffee cups. But if we could at least change the endoscopes and take them back to reusable ones, would be good. I was over in Tala University Hospital recently looking at how much waste, and so it was spoken about earlier in the morning about the amount of waste, and this image of the breast cancer patient who had laid it all out in a really excellent thing. So I went over to Tala Hospital to pick it up, just to take it back over to the university to start looking at what we could do with it. But I also talked to Medtronic, which was one of the companies that made these things. And one of the real things that they were having difficulty with is not having the paper-printed information for use, or how to use this instrument in these packages. They couldn't, because of legislation and EU regulation, get rid of them. So they had to print every single one and put it into every single packet. So this is not just a small change at the ground level that has to happen. This has to be a system-level change. And then with the Vascular Society, we started looking at not just the how you would reduce green surgery, but how do you look at the holistic system? How do you look at everything from cradle to grave for the patient coming in, and for the staff and people coming in and out of the institution as well? So how do you start looking at a much bigger picture than just trying to actually pick little bits and go, oh, well, we'll be actually okay with that? So this is looking at, from a DCU perspective, and I'm not picking on DCU, I'm really proud of some of the work that we're doing, but this is as a case study for an institution, and it follows on Peter's pie chart that he showed this morning, which looks at our Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. So our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions account for 13%. So our total energy consumption across all of our campuses is 13% of our total emissions. We have got 24% in staff and student commuting to and from the campus. We have more than 50-something% in the procurement. So procurement is huge. Now it depends on what you can capture. So the error bars are about this long. But this is where good data is better than, so we're not using perfect data or waiting for perfect data because it's the enemy of the good. It gives us enough of an insight to know these are key areas that we actually need to start addressing. One will note that waste, our total waste for all of our campuses with 18,000 students and 2,500 staff is less than 1%. So waste is not the problem. And the amount of emails I get about, oh, can I have another green bin in my office, please? You go, no, we're getting rid of all the bins. There is no point in recycling the waste. We have got to, and it's not even trying to green the supply chain. We need to sit down and have conversations about, do we really need it? Because one of the conversations I had with the Vascular Society working group was that when they go into surgery, they get this kit, and I have no idea, but they were telling me this, they get this kit of tools that they need when they go in, and they might use 10 or 15% of them. And then they're all shoveled off someplace else. And it's just really interesting how we need to look at the system size change of it. But it's not just system, because it is, are we looking at the appropriate targets? So this is DCU. We've been tracking our carbon emissions since 2018. So we've our total attributable emissions and our total GHG emissions. And they look very similar. And we can see the 2021 COVID dip. What we need to do is put them on the same scale. So on the same scale, our attributable emissions, which are the emissions we are required by government to report, are the smaller ones by far. The other ones are what we're actually emitting into the atmosphere, because the atmosphere doesn't care whether they're attributable or not, and therefore they are continuing to contribute to the change. Unless somebody starts asking us to address them, then we are only, it's not that we're only, we are favouring looking at our energy emissions, and as a whole sector, the higher education sector is looking for money to basically just retrofit our buildings. And if we retrofit our buildings, then it'll all be sorted and we can continue business as usual. So there's very little acceptance that we need to transform everything we're doing to look at the graph on the other side. So, and just from a laboratory's perspective, about 30% of our emissions comes from labs. And I guess that was because we connected the Green Labs system into this. So one of the things I would really love to push for is for a common alliance, so that we do not use sustainability as a differentiating factor. It is a tendency of the higher education institutions to try and do that, to differentiate ourselves, or we'll be first and then we'll actually share it with everybody else. So how do we create an alliance so that we're all going to raise all boats to a sustainability level, rather than actually continue to compete with each other on this? This is not something that anybody can win. If we all have a livable planet, then it's going to be a win for everybody. So some of the things that are going on, we have innovative living labs. So we have Smart DCU linked to Smart Dublin, looks at using the campuses, because a lot of our campuses are like small towns. So they have got loads of people coming in and out in the morning, they have got shops, they've got accommodation, they've got restaurants, they've got all of these different services, but we own and control all of them. So we can actually run projects that go, well, how does this interact with the big picture? And then if it works, we can deploy it on a broader scale. One of these ones we did with the IUA and the Campus Living Labs that was funded by the EPA, looking at the waste strands and how we would actually better do that. We're part of, like the HEA, the HSE. I knew it didn't sound right. The SEAI Pathfinder programs. So there's lots of cross-sectoral support and understanding that we need to start sharing much more. And I have to go really fast. I'm not going to go through this. This is one of the innovation solutions, and it'll be, I think we're sharing the slides afterwards. So this is a little clip on a project that's going on in DCU looking at plastic waste. So it is taking waste from the brewing industry in Ireland and turning it into compostable plastics. And I know some gentlemen earlier in the morning mentioned that they had moved their gowns to compostable plastic. But this would be made in Ireland and circulated in Ireland and going back onto the streets in Ireland. And I'll go forward with it, it'll play in the background. But innovation in all of these things, has to be bringing us back to within planetary boundaries, because no matter how shiny or cool or trendy the innovation is, if it doesn't bring us back to within planetary boundaries, or even to within our own carbon budgets nationally, it's not innovation, it's just business as usual. So this is another one that we have been working on for some time, looking at how you create this system change, because I constantly worry about, when I get run over by a bus, Is it all just going to stop in DCU and therefore they're going to go on business as usual type? So it is, how do you create that system change to build it into the system so that it doesn't make a difference what's going on? So this was working with lots of collaborators across Ireland. How do we take it from laboratory change? Because we've got loads of volunteers, but we really have got to take this actions out of the volunteer sector, and people need to be paid. It needs to be part of their job descriptions to do this, to take it to institutional change and then to actual system change. And one of the nice things about the Green Lab one was that we actually got SFI, or now Research Ireland, to buy into the Green Lab's methodology. So it is a method of measuring and assessing green labs so that everybody can actually progress along. Now, one of the things that this project has to start moving from is that the Green Labs is still more of a sticker than a standard, and we need to take it from being a sticker of, we've ticked all these boxes, to being an actual standard to say, whether it's going over to ISO or all the rest of it, that we're actually going to do it that way. So this is my last slide. What I would really encourage people to do is those networks. We have got to stop reinventing the wheels in our own individual institutions and really start trying to build a coalition together to actually make the changes. And so this is information and all the rest of it, and that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samantha. We're doing well for time. I'm going to crack on. If I actually read out the biography in front of me for our final guest, I'd use up all the time, so I'm not going to do that. But I'm delighted to introduce Luke Gibbons. He's a PhD candidate and an Irish Research Council scholar in Trinity, a former Fulbright scholar at Harvard Law School, and a scholar and graduate of the University of Oxford. It's quite a CV given he's, I don't think he's even 30 yet. No, he's not. God damn it. He was named in the top 30 under 30 environmental educators in the world. He was appointed as a climate reality leader by former US Vice President Al Gore and as a President Mary Robinson climate leader. And it goes on and it goes on. He is, needless to say, very impressive. The most impressive thing is that he's from Clare Morris, and he is Mayo Young Person of the Year 2024. Luke Gibbons.
Can everyone hear me through the head mic? Yes? No? Yeah, perfect. So, we're going to look at today truth in 10 or 20 minutes, because that's the time I have been given. And I want to start with the blue marble that we call Earth, the only place in the universe that we know of where human life can exist. And we're doing everything we can at the moment to destroy that. And we need to ask ourselves 3 questions. Must we change this? Can we change this? And will we change this? So looking at the first question, must we change? And it's important to get the basics right first. So what is global warming? So solar radiation comes down from the sun in the form of light waves, passes through the atmosphere. So most of this is absorbed by the Earth and warms it, but some of it is radiated back into the atmosphere. And unfortunately, this is then trapped and radiated back down to Earth and warms it. And the pace of this is being increased due to the amount of greenhouse gases that we are putting into the atmosphere every day. And the amount will shock you. We are spewing 162 million tons of human-made global warming pollution into the thin shell of our atmosphere every 24 hours. We are treating this like an open sewer. And look at it. It is that small. You could drive it at motorway speed within 6 to 7 minutes and reach the top. You could walk it in an hour. And once you get to the top, all of the greenhouse gas emissions will be below you. And some of the molecules are there for 100 years. So this is not just an issue for now, it is also an issue for the future. And where do these greenhouse gases come from? Well, they come from oil production, air transport, the forest burning, fertilization, coal plants, and the thawing permafrost, to name but a few. But the biggest emitter by far is the fossil fuel industry. And we can see there that this is naturally linked to human development. So when the global pandemic began, there was a huge drop in greenhouse gas emissions. When the global financial crisis happened in 2008, another drop in greenhouse gas emissions. And the energy trapped by human-made global warming pollution is now equivalent to exploding 750,000 first-generation atomic bombs per day, 365 days per year. And we all know what the explosion of an atomic bomb looks like, so times that by 750,000 around the Earth. And the statistics don't lie. The global surface is temperature is increasing exponentially. You can see there from the start of the end of World War II to 2023, it is starting to soar. And the last 10 years are the hottest years on record. So the situation that exists now is only getting worse. It is not stopping. And we have had last year the hottest summer of the last 2,000 years since records began. And Europe is the continent that is experiencing this worst. It is the fastest warming continent in the world at 2 times the global average. So this is an issue for us here in Ireland to take seriously. Heat waves in 2022 killed 61,672 people in Europe and 18,010 deaths in Italy alone. These are not just statistics. There are people's moms, dads, brothers, uncles, aunties, children, future grandchildren. And amazingly, if current projections stay the same, this summer of 2022 will be the average summer by 2035. In only 10 years' time, we could have over 61,000 people dying in Europe each year due to climate change and heat waves. And the problem is that the Earth is going to change. 3 billion people are no longer going to be able to live where they are if we go above 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature limit. And as John Gibbons noted this morning, this is making some of the Earth's zones uninhabitable. Currently, we can see a very small part of the Earth cannot support human life. But by 2070, we see that is going to be a huge amount. These people are going to have to go somewhere. We currently have migration crises because of wars. We're going to have migration crises because of climate change. Now, where does the majority of this warming go? Well, 93% of the extra heat is trapped and into the oceans. And this has serious issues. We can see here not that much in the atmosphere, the land. We can see that there's not really that much trapped in the ice, but then when we get to the oceans, huge amounts of heat being trapped by the oceans. And half of this increase in ocean temperatures has occurred in the last 20 years. And what is this causing? It is increasing the frequency and the intensity of storms. We can see in 2023, for the first time on record, storms reached Category 5 in all of the tropical ocean basins for the first time in the same year. This is disrupting the hydrological cycle as well. Warmer oceans release more water vapor into the air. This water vapor must come out of the air, and therefore the hydrological cycle is spinning out of balance. And this causes what has become the phenomenon of rain bombs, which are that powerful, they have the strength where they can kill people. You often hear people saying in Ireland, God, that was a terrible shower. We didn't see showers like that before when I was young. And the reason is simply climate change. And although predictions show that annual precipitation is going to decrease overall, the frequency of these concentrated phenomena known as rain bombs is going to increase. We already see it in Italy, where 14 people died from flooding last year, where 20,000 people had to evacuate, and this cost 9.7 billion in damages. We see it in Slovenia, where in August last year, 2/3 of the country experienced flooding. And we also also see it in Germany in May of this year, where they had damaging floods all across the EU. And the insurance companies are looking at this, and they have given us the statistics which we need to take seriously. Worldwide extreme weather catastrophes are on the rise. You can see it there from the graph. And this is costing the global economy $3.28 trillion in the last decade, with an increase of almost $600 billion over the previous 10 years. You can see there's a theme here. Things are only getting worse. Now, the same extra heat that evaporates into these rain bombs is also causing the land to dry. So we have simultaneously more rainfall, but also more droughts. You often hear people on the street saying, I don't understand how the earth is getting drier, Ireland's only getting wetter. Because Ireland is a part of the earth that's getting wetter, whereas parts of Spain are simultaneously getting drier. We see this in Italy, the River Po. 20% over the last 40 years has the water in it has decreased by 20%. We see this anomaly of moisture across the EU, some parts way wetter than average, some parts way drier than average. And we see it here in a river in France. No need for the bridge anymore. You could simply drive across the riverbed because the droughts have got that bad. And what do these droughts cause? They increase the number of fires that are happening across the world. We can see it quite clearly there. As temperatures peak, the amount of fires peak. What do fires do? They increase the greenhouse gas emissions going into the atmosphere, and it is a vicious cycle. In the EU alone in 2023, 500,000 hectares were burnt in forest fires. We can see one here in Sicily, in Italy, where the strong Scirocco winds and high temperatures attributed to a huge outbreak of wildfires. Thanks to NASA, they documented how widespread this was, and I think the picture there speaks for itself. In 2023 alone, wildfires burnt 97,000 hectares in Italy, which was the second highest total in the EU. The largest area was 175,000 hectares in Greece. We can see here that one fire alone burnt 96,000 hectares of forestry. And as the Greek Prime Minister put it, we are at war. The climate crisis is already here. Now, what are these rising temperatures also doing? They're melting the ice. If we look at Greenland here, this unnamed glacier from 1935, full of ice. That is the same glacier in the summer of 2013. It is practically a river. This is the rate that the ice is melting at. The statistics, again, don't lie. 2002 to 2023, huge decline. They're not tons, they're gigatons of ice. And this has impacts. It's putting global cities at risk of sea level rise. We can see there the proportion of population in Kolkata that are going to be at risk of rising sea levels. It's not just people. Assets at risk. Insurance companies, again, are extremely worried about this. Over $3 trillion of assets at risk in Miami alone if we do not act now. We can see that these rising sea levels are also being met by storm surges, heavy rainfall. We're not immune to it in Ireland. And we can see here from Pisa that in Venice, in Italy, that St. Mark's Basilica has flooded only 7 times in the last 1,200 years, and 5 of those times has been in the last 25 years. Something is wrong, and we need to do something about it. We can see that the coast in France is being lost at 20 meters per year due to rising sea levels. And apt for today, climate change is the biggest health threat facing humanity. We can see here in Europe that heat-related deaths have increased by 30% in the last 20 years. And climate change is also disrupting our natural ecosystems in a way that's making it better for infectious diseases. As humans develop, we explored our natural habitat of the Earth more. We are uncovering 5 new infectious diseases each year. And these are spreading all over the world, as we can see on the map. We can see West Nile virus in places it was never before. We can see dengue fever in places it was never before, and Zika virus. These are all putting our health systems under immense stress. The mosquito that supports dengue fever is now established in 13 European countries. And these increased flood events are also, as we heard earlier today, increasing the outbreaks of waterborne diseases. Worldwide, every year, air pollution from fossil fuels kills 8.7 million people. Air pollution from fossil fuels that we can prevent. We can see in Italy again, 300,000 premature deaths across Europe each year. We can see the air pollution in Milan is visible. It is something we can address. These are deaths we can prevent only if we act now. The climate crisis is also an extinction and biodiversity crisis. In this century, 50% of all land species will be lost if we don't do something about climate change. My grandchildren will not know about 50% of the species that I was taught about in school. They simply will not exist anymore. So what does all this mount up to? The cost of carbon. What we're putting into the atmosphere every day is costing us all of these things and more. And it's also the number one threat to the global economy. So must we change? The answer is simple, yes. Now, can we change? Just to bring up the mood of the room a little bit. So we have the solutions at hand. The International Energy Agency has outlined that we have the technology available to us to reduce emissions by 50% by 2030, to prevent all of the predictions that I've just gone through. And we have outpaced ourselves on previous predictions. The 2000 prediction for worldwide wind capacity was to reach 30 gigawatts by 2010. In reality, by 2023, that goal has been exceeded by a factor of 34 times. Italy, again, great example. 2000 to 2023, exponentially, they have increased their gigawatt capacity of wind energy. In the EU, for example, they added 17 gigawatts of new wind capacity last year. However, to meet the EU's targets, that has to increase to 30 gigawatts per year. So we are doing what we can, but we need to do more. Globally, wind could supply worldwide electricity consumption 40 times over. Look at the west of Ireland. Putin, he can turn off the oil, he can turn off the gas, he cannot turn off the wind. He cannot turn off the natural resource that we have available to us in the west of Ireland, and we need to take advantage of that. We have the potential here to become the powerhouse of Europe. The government have to get their finger out and act on that. Solar progress, for example. 2002 projection was that the solar market would grow by 1 gigawatt per year by 2010. What did it do in reality? Is that goal was exceeded 17 times. And in 2023, it was exceeded by 445 times. So these changes are possible. Again, Italy doing amazing things in relation to solar capacity. And why is this occurring? Because it's becoming economically viable now to change, because the cost of solar cells is decreasing. We can see here in Germany, Europe added 56 gigawatts of solar capacity in 2023, which was a 40% annual increase and an all-time record. We might not have it in Ireland, but across the EU, the natural resource of the sun needs to be harvested. We are too reliant in Europe on Russian oil and gas, and we can become self-sufficient. New electricity capacity in the EU in 2023 was 95% from solar and wind. So the EU are acting, they just need to act quicker. Renewables generated 44% of the EU's electricity in 2023, which was a new record. And enough solar energy reaches the Earth every hour to fill the world's energy needs for a full year. Every hour, we have enough energy arriving to us for free from the sun to fulfill our energy needs for a year. Electric cars in Europe are on the rise. It is a small change, but it's also a necessary change. We can see sales figures from 2011 to 2023 growing dramatically. And according to Bloomberg, the world hit its peak reliance on gas-powered vehicle sales in 2017. For instance, Norway is an outlier in Europe where 91% of their new cars sold last year were electric. And the reason why that is they've invested in their charging infrastructure, something we need to do in Ireland if it is a viable option for people living in rural Ireland reliant on the car. And why is this becoming easier? Because global cumulative storage capacity is expanding. Solar and wind are intermittent energies. If we have a day in Ireland where it's gloomy and we have no solar, and it happens to not be breezy either, we might not have an energy source. However, we can now store it because the capacity is developing. And in Europe, capacity grew by 121% to store this energy year on year. And this is an economic opportunity for investors. Investing in renewables creates 3 times more jobs at present than investing in the fossil fuel sector. Europe has 1.9 million clean jobs, including 650,000 in solar and 400,000 in the wind sector. And if we do this, if we do all this and we grab the bull by the horns, for want of a better word, we can stop the overall increase in temperature, but only if we reach net zero emissions. And the lag time is exceptionally short for that to occur. So I want to move on now to the last part, is will we change, which is the most important question. The Paris Agreement has great aspirations, but in reality it is a hard law instrument with only soft obligations on states. Although 81% of global emissions are from these countries who have set net zero targets, enough is not occurring. The G7 countries, to give them their due, have agreed to install renewable energy capacity worldwide by 2030. However, over 425 global companies have made commitments to 100% renewable. But we need to make sure that these are more than just words, that this is more than just greenwashing. And how are we going to do this? Well, people are already acting. We see in Rome, Italy in 2024, huge demonstrations because of fossil fuels. Madrid, Spain in 2023, demonstrations, people rising up, acting with their feet, and also in Athens, Greece in 2019. So we need to join those who are using their voices, their votes, their choices to fight for their future, their community, and their world. Use your voice, use your vote, use your choices. Speak truth to power like your world depends on it, because your world does depend on it. Thank you.